Hi, if you don't know me, I'm Makambe, and I'm so happy that you're here. I wanted to riff a little bit about why I'm so obsessed with sharing my culture. Reason number one, it's nice and it's great, and you are welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Reason number two, I wrote this down earlier today, and I think it perfectly encapsulates what's at the heart of the intention for me. Uh, I wrote, if I don't share it, I won't see it. And when I don't see it, I feel like I don't exist. When I feel like I don't exist, I don't show up for my assignment. This is my truth right now because I'm not living where I'm from. I am living and working in a predominantly white industry in a predominantly white institution. And so I'm craving representation of myself. And if I don't show up and sort of own my culture 100%, no one else will. And this is not just about me being a Black person, which I am, but um, Blackness has many shades and multitudes. How? Uh, Let me say it a different way. People define their Blackness in many different ways. And mine has to do with the fact that to me, Black is such a big, wide umbrella. And we understand that a certain way living in the West. Because I think of African American culture and experience in which you had enslaved Africans coming from a diverse group of tribes in different parts of um, the continent who had language and culture stripped from them. So um, there ends up being this existence of people who are Black, but really that there's a number of really, really diverse cultures, languages, traditions, and kingdoms in which those OG people came from. So for me, my Blackness is not just about being Black. So it's also about the fact that I am African. And it's not just about being African, it's about the fact that I am Zambian. And I put Zambian in air quotes, even though Zambia is all I'm obsessed with. And I just talk about Zambia all the time. And my nickname for myself is Zambians to the point that I've actually, I have forced it upon my friends to start calling me Zambians, like as if Zambians is my name on my birth certificate. Like, for example, I'll say things like, Zambians feel like eating a hamburger today. And then sometimes my friends will be like, really all Zambians feel like eating a hamburger today, trying to point out to me that it's a very silly nickname to have, but they didn't realize that I'm the kind of person who's going to double down, especially when it comes to me and my own shit. So I'll be like, yes, and Zambians would like a glass of Coca-Cola too, to the point that they started calling me Zambians. But it's not just about me being Zambian. uh, Zambia is in quotes because Zambia is made up. Zambia is the name that we called the land after this group of people, my grandparents, great grandparents, like that generation, gained independence. Great grandparents? Parents, that wasn't that long ago that I'm thinking about it. Yeah, yeah, my grandparents and parents, that those folks got independence in the early 60s. So before that, it was called Northern Rhodesia. Cecil Rhodes, sir, respectfully, fuck you. Go away. Leave our land alone. So frustrating. Um, so Northern Rhodesia was a British colony, and so when independence was gained, for the way that that piece of land was carved, that is now Zambia. So I put Zambia in air quotes because I'm trying to acknowledge the fact that a lot of how that land was carved actually did not have to do with indigenous people. One of the things that colonizers did when they were colonizing is they just were like, when they sat in that conference, I always forget the name of this conference, but they all sat in a conference and they were like, okay, so the French guys, you can have this side, Belgium, you can have this side, England, you can have this guy side. And they kind of agreed which part of other people's kingdoms they were going to go and be able to agree that they were okay, this is yours and this is yours. Like absolutely bananas. That's like me going to your house and telling my friends what of your bedrooms that they can all have, but it's not my house. Anyway, I acknowledge that Zambia is a country that is made up of multiple kingdoms. So, for example, I am Lozi by tribe on my mom's side. And the Lozi kingdom is not just in Zambia, even though it's mostly in Zambia, but when colonizers, kolololos, when they made those boundaries and lines, like they cut in the middle of like ancestral land. So there's Lozi people in the neighboring countries. So we're all from the same tribe, but we don't have the same passport. Anyway, I am Zambian, but the thing that feels truest to me is to say that I am Lozi. That's on mom's side. And on my dad's side, I'm Tonga and I'm Ila. And there's something that feels like true, authentic, original, or closer to original. That's the most OG, old information that I have in terms of these are my people, this is who I come from. Um, and it feels really important to acknowledge that. And if I don't hold that up, who else is going to do it? It's maybe easier if I were, maybe would have been easier if I was in a space where there were lots of other Zambians, for example. But even if I was in a predominantly Zambian space, I would still be craving the representation of my own tribes, right? Anyway, when I consider myself living in a predominantly white space and working there, and also the fact that I'm not an accountant, I don't do work that is objective. Everything that I do is subjective because my job is to tell stories. It's to tell them with my body, it's to tell them with my words, it's to tell them with my energy. And so my intention with the work is always to truth tell, whatever that means. Even if the truest thing in that moment is to ask a question or to acknowledge that I don't know what the truth is or that I'm struggling with the truth, that's the intention. So it feels really disingenuous to not be able to fully show up as my Zambian Africanness in any space that I am ever, but much less a storytelling space. And it feels really painful to feel like anytime I'm in a space where there's not a proper understanding or reverence or respect for that, um, because it's such an important part of who I am. And having grown up away from my people in that way, it's even more important. Perhaps it might resonate differently if I had grown up most of my life in Zambia, but I grew up actually in the Caribbean. We left Zambia when I was 7. So I've always been so fascinated with culture. I don't know. I just think like I think back to baby Makambe, who was a 7 year old. So the first place we moved was Guyana. Shout out to my Guyanese. We lived in Guyana, the British Virgin Islands, and then the Cayman Islands before coming over to Canada. And I just think about, especially 7 year old, 8 year old, 9 year old Makambe, just being like a little anthropologist, just really taking in like culture, just really understanding like, okay, so these people, some of them look like me, but they don't sound like me, and starting to like process that as a baby. And now that I'm a grown up, I'm still continuously processing it just on different levels. But um, the reason I'm so obsessed with sharing that is because it's who I am. And when people are in the dominant culture or the dominating culture around you, around me, and it feels to them like I'm being too much, or it's like I won't shut up about being black, I won't shut up about being Zambian. It's it's a reaction that I get a lot, not from everyone, by the way, but like sometimes I do see that it's annoying people, and sometimes people will kind of articulate that to me nicely. It's funny to me because I'm like, wow, I really annoy you. Sometimes people will articulate that to me nicely or kind of be like, why are you bringing it up again? But it kind of goes back to the first thing that I said. Like, if I don't if I don't articulate that part of me existing, like no, none of you are gonna hold that for me. So I gotta do it for myself. Also, I think that what happens is like sometimes if you are in a place of privilege because you are in the dominating or the dominant culture in the space that you're in, you don't realize how often you are being reflected back to yourself because it's just your normal. But I have a hyper awareness of all the times that I am not, and I have a hyper awareness of all the times where I am trying to fit into this thing that's not mine in quite the same way. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't still be here doing the art, telling the story, but it's a different relationship. And not everybody gets it, and that's fine. They don't have to. The other reason I'm so excited about sharing my culture is that I'm so aware that the world has given me so much messaging that I should be like ashamed of who I am or where I'm from or feel like we're less like the messaging on like black people are trash, Africa is trash is abundant. I remember growing up like even when I was in the Caribbean and I went to primarily sort of like private schools like yeah, I definitely had a privileged education in that way. Like my parents really prioritized school, so I always went to the best school they could physically afford. So sometimes some of my schools growing up were bougie, um, but even with like Black Caribbean kids, like the messaging and the jokes about like Africa being trash, just abundant. Like, does your grandmother live in a hut? Ah, you speak English very well. I'm like, the national language of Zambia is English. Do you want me to explain to you why that is? Um, like, there's so many reasons why I could hate myself or not like myself or not feel like I should own my heritage 100,000%. I when I meet black folks who are a little bit in the sunken place or they don't quite know how to hold that, I have learned to have quite a lot of compassion because if you look at the world, like there's so much messaging that says that that's how you should like shrink yourself, make yourself smaller, and if you don't, we'll shoot you and we are the police. You know, all that stuff. So I'm also just like proud that I'm proud, if that makes sense. I'm proud that I'm proud. The third reason is that I've talked a lot about people who don't really get it and don't understand why it's important or are not delighted by me sharing this part of myself. But my truth is that I have a lot of friends who are not African or black or Zambian, and they are so thrilled when I share this part of myself with them. And that's how I know that that's my people. Anybody who doesn't intrinsically understand why I'm holding this in a very embodied way kind of just doesn't understand me because it's so important to me. Like I kind of make the joke that like my culture and my ancestry is kind of like my whole personality, but like actually it is. And there are people in my life who get that and I love them. And there are people who don't get that and that's totally fine. I feel like also being a Zambian person, I don't know how other Zambians feel about this, but I feel like I'm not in one of the popular African destinations that I see a lot of diaspora, like African diaspora spaces for, or what's a better way to say that? When I see African representation, let's say on theater stages, I feel like Zambia is not usually the first place you're seeing. It's not the African place that you've heard about or seen the movie about for the most part, right? I would say in the dominant sort of African diaspora, I feel like people have a much bigger awareness of Nigeria, obviously Ghana. Um, I would say if you move south, I would say obviously South Africa. I would say like Kenya. I think that there are places where there are more popping or more visible, is that the word, African spaces that kind of get a little bit more traction in the mainstream. And I love that for all those places and I want more art and more representation from all of them. But also it's nice to just be Zambian. Like I can Nigerian art is a really really good example because the Nigerian population is enormous. The Nigerian diaspora is big. There's not a single place I've ever lived where there aren't Nigerians. Like that is a huge population, which with like an incredible, not just arts history, but like current arts practice. Like, yeah, the Nigerians are out here doing it. So I'll use them as an example. When I see Nigerian art or see a Nigerian movie or listen to Nigerian music, oh, I love that for me. And I can relate to it, but it's not the same as like me seeing a Zambian thing. Do you get me? So it still means a lot to me and I still want more of that art all the time, but it's not the same for me as a Zambian artist to be able to actually be like, I understand the place that they're referencing because I've been there or my parents have told me about that. Um, I understand this word in an indigenous language because I just know it. I know this particular ism. Also, Nigeria is a really good example just because it's in a different part of Africa. So these are big, broad strokes generalizations that I'm making, but like West African versus like Southern African culture, it's different. We're so diverse. And it's different. So to see like the specific subtleties of like what the Zambianness is very exciting to me. So I just want to like own and acknowledge that, and I want to be that for myself because I don't see it around me all the time. Yeah. The last thing that I want to sort of talk about is language. So I just posted a video on Instagram, which is me teaching you basically how to say thank you in 7 of the major languages in Zambia. Zambia speaks over 70 languages. Sir, that's a lot because we're smart and we're diverse and we know about it. And so I have set the intention to connect more deeply with Indigenous languages. I'm always practicing my Lozi, and that's what I speak the best. Oh my gosh, Tonga and Ila, please, I am still help me. That one I'm really starting from the basics, but Lozi is such that I can get by, and when I'm around folks speaking it, I can just pick it up a lot more. Like it's not as effortful. Anyway, my intention to learn other Indigenous languages, including ones that are not of my actual heritage, is that in this next chapter of my storytelling journey, I want to really record more stories from our elders. I want to do that sooner than later because the thing with elders, they're great, but the thing with elders is they're leaving soon. So we gotta get on that. My greatest fear is to always sit here and have the dream of like, oh, I can't wait to interview Uncle so and so. And then I don't do it, I don't do it, I don't do it for one reason or another. And then Uncle so and so passes away, knock on wood. And then like I've missed the opportunity to connect with this elder who was actually very willing and open and happy to share with me all of these stories. I would love to be able to receive at least some of those stories in the native tongue of those elders because A, how beautiful, B, what a privilege, C, if I have a bit more proficiency or understanding, I know that I'm going to get more out of the stories. So it's not difficult for me to find somebody to translate for me. Like, Zambians are incredibly multilingual. When I think just for example in my own family, a lot of people just like basically are like fully fluent in 3 languages. So when I think of my mom's side, so mummy's people are Lozi, so a lot of Lozi people came to Lusaka. So Lusaka is no longer in like Lozi ancestral land, so people there are not really operating in Lozi anymore. So they're operating in Nyanja, let's say, like if you're in a market, right? So a lot of my cousins will speak Lozi fluently, and then they speak Nyanja because that's how they got by. They'll speak Bemba because a lot of their friends are Bemba, and so they'll kind of be able to get by in Bemba. And then they speak English because that's the language that everybody's doing for school and work and stuff like that. So that's like 4 languages. Anyways, um, a lot of I have a lot of I'm really, really blessed to be able to have people who can translate for me. The issue with translation is that I know that folks will be able to translate for me the practicality of all of the phrases in the story, but I'm not confident in anyone's ability to translate the poetry in the way that I feel like I need to receive it. So, the thing that is really ouchy about having lost language or been stripped from language or kind of growing up at a time where a lot of immigrant parents do this thing which it's like, guys, can we just never do that again? Like, so they'll move to a different place and then they'll stop speaking their language because they are afraid it'll confuse the child, and so they tell the child just speak this language. And it's just like, guys, your kids are so intelligent, and also like when they're really young is the best time for them to actually have the multiple languages, because then they'll be able to learn them faster and better, and like they won't be confused, they'll be fine. Because what happens is I have so many friends my age, Zambian friends, and also just like from different parts of the world, who have had a version of that experience where it's just like, oh yeah, like my parents fluently speak their language or their languages, but like we don't, because they spoke English to us. And it's just like, it, I don't like it. I don't like it. Big love and forgiveness to our parents and our grandparents. They were navigating a lot. They did what they could. But um, what's ouchy about the loss of language is like, A, it's hard to get back. Like, even Lozi, which I can get by in, I don't get to practice it very often. So in Canada, I have my mom. So when I speak to her on the phone, um, I guess we speak kind of in Lozi and English, but when I speak to some of my family back home, I speak in Lozi, but it's not something that I get to practice all the time. So it's tricky to sort of just be around it. I really have to have a lot of intention. And if I'm slacking and I'm not on top of it, or I'm lazy, because learning a language is hard, and I'm a very wordy, words of affirmation, verbal processy type of person. And so the moment it starts to get hard to express myself, or express a thought that requires nuance in Silozi, I just want to switch to English, because I'm really good at this colonizer's language. I'm good at it. And it's hard for me to feel like I'm not expressing myself fully. So if that's an option, if the other person speaks English fluently, then like I'll just jump to that. But the ouch comes from not just like, okay, I feel like I'm not in on this cultural experience that my ancestors had, or like that my cousins have. That's one thing. But the other thing that makes it really dangerous, um, in terms of losing language, is that like when you have Indigenous people who are naming naming words, creating language, there's a lot of information that can be found in the way that we use words that relates to what we value in our culture. So, an example that I'll use is like, so in Lozi and in a lot of Bantu languages, we don't have a word for aunt or uncle per se, or like niece or nephew, or even cousin, right? The word you just use to describe those people are, that's my parent, that's my um, that's my brother, that's my sister. We don't have a word for cousin. We don't have a word for aunt or uncle. That's just your mom and your dad. We do have words that talk about age, like birth order, or who's older. So when I speak to my cousin who is a bit older than me, I call her Mukulwange. And that's basically me saying like, sibling of my same gender who's older than me. And she'll respond to me, she'll call me Minange. Like, it's kind of like, so she's calling me her sibling of the same gender who's younger than her. But if I'm to talk about my brother or a male cousin, I would call that person my Kezeli, and he would call me his Kezeli. And so there's a there's a way in which the language therefore illuminates, okay, that it was more important to come up with language about who's older and who's younger, and when the genders are different, than necessarily, oh, this person is not your mother's child, it's your mother's sister's child. Does that make sense? The reason I bring that up is that a really common phrase that people hear, like a common African proverb, like it takes a village to raise a child. And there's something within our culture that has to do with like the idea of the village, the idea of community, the idea of the kijiji. Like there's something about that thing of like that adage that, back in the day, anybody could discipline you, which sometimes would be crazy because like I would hate to be slapped by a random person in the street. But there was a sense of that, like everybody's child is everybody's responsibility, and that is inherent in our language. So when we lose our language, we lose that reminder in terms of culture, because if I only relate to my cousins as not the same way that I relate to my direct siblings, it changes a little bit of the makeup of my brain. Does that make sense? So language is really important because it gives us all of this gorgeous information about what is important culturally. I'm also going to link a video that I saw where an uncle was describing, I'm going to butcher it, but he was basically talking about the same idea of the importance of indigenous languages and that there's so much information. And so I gave you an example that has to do with like family relationships and how we name and relate to people. But he has a really lovely example about um, basically the body and medicine and how um, a tree that has the medicine for a sick stomach has the word stomach in the name of the tree. So there's a sense of indigenous like knowledge in terms of like, oh, like when your stomach is sick, this is the tree that you get the leaf from to make the thing. And so the fact that that's in the name of it helps us relate to it in a certain way. But when you translate that into English, we don't have a stomach tree, but that particular tribe knew that, hey, this tree is actually really good for your gut, so they gave them like connected names, so we always have that information. So when you lose language, you lose that kind of information, and I'm cognizant of that. The thing that helps me be less salty about the fact that I speak English better than I speak my own languages, it's really, really, really painful. It's not nice. I don't like it. It's not nice. But the thing that makes me feel better is that like I actually just sat down one day. I was like, you know what, Makambe, you're actually really lucky. You have a lot of privilege because you, first of all, there are so many black people in the world who don't even know who who don't even know exactly what their OG tribes are, right? So when I think to transatlantic slavery, there are so many people who don't know with the specificity that you know in terms of like I am Lozi, and like to be able to track their family history back to the royal family in both of my tribes. Yes, I'm a princess. I didn't tell you. A lot of people would probably have to die for me to get any sort of, but yes, I have these connections in my family where yes, I'm connected to the royalty on like on the Lozi side and also on the Tonga side. So there is a sense of, I do think that it's a privilege to be able to have access to not only that information, but B, I can literally still today physically go to that ancestral land and stand there where my ancestors have been standing since a very, very, very long time. When you do that, and the fact that that land is still within the control of my own people, that's a privilege that a lot of my friends don't have. A lot of people don't have that in the same way. Um, when you go to a place like that where your people have been and been and been and been and been, like when I was in Loziland last time and we went outside the palace and we stood there, like the energetic charge up that you receive is like nothing else. And like I'm so lucky that I get to have direct access to that. Um, so lucky. And the fact that I think that okay, who has power in Zambia? Uh, I think that colonizers still have their hands in too much of everything, but also there is something about being able to go to Zambia, and it's a still a predominantly black country, and it's ran by people who are indigenous to those places, right? Like the fact that there's still the king of Loziland, the fact that there's still like Chief Simamba and like the chiefs of Tongaland, like the fact that there's still power within the folks who are always there is really validating, and it also helps aid in the preservation of culture, the preservation of language, and the preservation of tradition. So I'm privileged in this way because all I have to do is go and ask. I just have to make the time and go. And I, so far in the ways that I've done this quite intentionally, I've always been met with such an abundance of people who are excited to share and excited to like, I don't know, explain things to me and translate for me. And like that's something that not all my friends have. Even when I think of like my friends who are indigenous to Canada, um, I think of, you know, I work in theater. We do land acknowledgements before every show, and we're naming the list of all of these groups of people. But I recognize also, like, yes, but like, so if I'm doing a show in Toronto and we're talking about the original caretakers of that piece of land, it's also not those original caretakers who are properly respected and consulted on that land. You know, that's not who has the the power, the political power. You know, that's not who's in office. So there's a way in which I realize that I'm just like really lucky to be able to be connected to my indigeneity in that way. Um, mhm. It's actually an Indigenous friend who helped me come to that realization, because we were just talking about what it's like to be able to go back to land and to sort of feel like, okay, I'm with my people. And it's not without colonization and leaving its little dingleberries behind. But this is such a bigger conversation, which is more nuanced, so I won't really get into it. But I realized that I'm really lucky. I have access. I can call my mom on the phone and be like, what's this word? I can call my uncles on WhatsApp and ask them things. I have access. Like, that's a real privilege. It's a privilege that I get to, that I'm wanting this information and that it is available to me, or a lot of it is available to me. And that's not something that everyone has. So it makes me even more excited to lean into finding out. And maybe, I came into this life to be born of my culture, but to be raised somewhere else so that I could have a deep craving and appreciation for it and be one of the people who records and creates, tapped into that source in a particular way. I think that that's part of my assignment on this earth. So, back to my OG quote, speaking of assignments, um, why I want to share my culture all the time. In the space that I am, if I don't share it, I won't see it. When I don't see it, I feel like I don't exist. When I feel like I don't exist, I don't show up for my assignment. And my assignment is incredible. So that's all from me today. Shout out to this chitenge. Yeah, I love wearing chitenge because it's beautiful, but also when I feel a little bit lonely, it makes me feel so grounded. It just like reminds me of who I am when I don't have the energy to be like, I'm Zambian, Zambians, which is many days the energy, but sometimes we want to be a little bit more quiet about it because we don't have the spoons, darling. We simply don't have the spoons. We can't. We simply can't. Hmm. I just looked at the time. I gotta go to rehearsal. I love you so much. Thank you for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye.